So welcome everybody to the 2020 Houston Cinema Arts Festival and the post-screening Q&A of Through the Night. We are so lucky and grateful. Oh, and my name is Jessica Green. I'm the artistic director of the Houston Cinema Arts Society and Festival. And I almost forgot that because I'm so excited because we have a very important guest here today, Loira Limbal, the director of Through the Night, who is a powerhouse who I have known since she was a young woman, since I was a relatively young woman. She is also the co-director of a previous film, Estilo Hip Hop with V Bravo. She is also the senior VP of programs at Firelight Media, and is just doing incredible work in the field, in the documentary field, and has just, as you guys all know, because you've now watched the film, made this just beautiful, incandescent, lovely, moving, heart-wrenching documentary film. And I am so proud of her and so glad to be with her to talk about it. So Loira, I'm gonna get right into it. I'm gonna ask you your first question. So yeah, I guess really the first question I wanna start with is, I looked into the background of the broader background of the story a bit, and looked into the fact that I think it's like 45% of parents in the US work, in some kind of capacity in some kind of overnight job and have childcare needs overnight. And there's about 6%, providers. There's about 6% of childcare providers for overnight needs as of now. And I guess those stats are probably pre-pandemic. I'm really interested in how you did what, documentary filmmakers dream of doing, in that you encapsulated this issue and this theme and this concern and this idea and this experience in this very, very precise, personal story following these incredible characters. As you know, I worked for several years for Albert Maysles, and he would always talk about, you have to walk in another person's shoes to really understand what's going on. And I'm just really wondering about the genesis of the project, if it was this theme, this idea, exploring childcare, exploring these needs around overnight, if that kind of drove your, finding these subjects, or if you met the subjects first and then kind of delved further into the story, because it just seems like this is the perfect marriage of subject and character. And it's the perfect way to get us that are not as aware as we should be of this issue, and maybe those that are aware that also just need to be reflected and need to see their story reflected. This was the perfect vehicle, I think, for that. So I'm just wondering, what's the genesis of Through the Night? How did it come together?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for all the kind words. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with you and to be part of this festival. So thank you, Jessica. It's really nice when the years pass and relationships sort of morph and you reconnect with people in new ways and in different roles and things like that. So especially in these times, I'm really holding on to those connections. So it's really a treat to be here. In terms of the genesis of the film, I read an article about these tots, the daycare that is featured in the film. And the article was looking precisely at what you're talking about, right? The fact that, many people in the US now have to work something like 1.25 jobs. Many of those jobs require non-standard hours, sometimes overnight or just really long, or hours that shift from day to day because schedules are set by algorithms and, just sort of the reality of work in the US, right? And then the article posed the question, well, if that's the case, well, who's looking after people's children, right? And in the article, they have lots of statistics, and they talked a little bit about some of the stories of parents that were at these tots. And when I read the article, it immediately made me think about my mother and my own childhood, because my mother raised us working the night shift. I'm the oldest of 4 children. She raised us as a single working mother. She was a home health aide, so also a caregiver, worked from 8 p.m. at night to 8 a.m. at night, making minimum wage in New York City. And as the oldest, I was kind of her right hand, in terms of supporting with childcare and just helping kind of keep the household and the family afloat. She also didn't speak English. So I was the translator / administrator from a really young age. And so that all gave me a real sort of first hand view into how difficult what she was dealing with was and what she was juggling, right?
Mhm.
And so in reading the article, it immediately transported me. It was like I literally saw myself at
Mm.
9 years old and
Mm.
my mother when I was 9 years old. And then I thought about, well, this is 30 years later.
Mhm.
Nothing has changed. This is also, the story of my neighbor, my auntie, the woman down the block, all these Black and Latina
Mhm.
working class women that I know, but I've never seen the story told anywhere,
Mhm.
right? And so that made me become like quickly obsessed
Mhm.
with the idea of making the film. And I think the point of departure really was thinking precisely about like wanting to gift my mother something, a film that was reflective of her experiences, and to
Mhm.
gift the women in the film, something that was affirming and like layered and nuanced and kind of patient and curious. It was this idea of wanting to provide a mirror for all the women in my life, both in the film and outside of the film, whose reality is this, but who are invisibilized,
Mhm.
which I think is an added level of violence,
Mhm.
right? Like the conditions of capitalism and of work in the United
Mhm.
States are already materially violent, but then that sort of invisibility coupled with when you do appear or when people do talk about you, it's typically to cast judgment,
Mhm.
because that's the other side of it, right? It's like the US forces people to work this way. And then if you're a Black woman or a Latina woman, then the society also has the nerve to judge you and say you're
Mhm.
a bad parent because somebody else is raising your kids. And so there's all this violence, right? It's material, it's sort of
Mhm.
psychological, right? And in all of that violence, like I wanted to gift these women that are very much a part of my world, my family, and my
Mhm.
community, something that could feel like a bit of a love letter,
Mhm. Mhm.
something that could feel like the things that I wish for them, which
Mhm.
are, respect and dignity, but also some
Mhm.
ease and some tenderness,
Mhm.
and sleep, because sleep should be a very basic universal right. But, in the film, Marisol, Shannon, and Nunu, Patrick, none of them get any more than 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night,
Mhm.
because that's what late stage capitalism in the US means, right? Is that sleep has become a luxury that is only available to the
Mhm.
few. And so that's really the genesis. So I think, just to kind of close out the thought, the key thing for me is that I've made the film for the people in the film,
Mhm.
and so that I think informed a lot of the approach. And so there was never a desire to explain or to educate, because I wasn't thinking about people outside of this community.
Mhm.
The point of departure really was this community itself. And so the desire was, or what I was seeking was to reflect, behold, evoke, affirm,
Mhm.
right? And so then that sort of shaped the approach of the film.
Yeah, and you did it. I mean, I think you were successful, and it is the love letter that you intended it to be. And I think that in with this film, with your direction and your producing and all the work that you do, there is that through line of making what is unseen seen. And I want to just kind of come back to that because that's something I've been thinking about a lot. Upon watching it, for a second time, and yeah, I think that yeah, that's something that I want us to come back to. Has your mother seen the film,
She has.
and what is her reaction?
It's been a trip. I mean, she loves it. She's super proud. Her immediate reaction was really to Nunu, and she was,
Hmm.
oh my God, Nunu does so much work. She's doing so much physical
Yeah,
labor,
yeah,
like she's working so hard. This woman, like, I want her to sit down and take a break,
yeah.
Her immediate reaction, one of the sort of not long term, but shortly after effects of the film and the conversations that we've had as a family around the film was that she and I actually ended up having a conversation that was very unexpected to me, in which she apologized to me for, in her words, she said, you know, I can't believe I did that to you. And she was sort of talking about um, leaving me home alone as a young child to care for my, like, you know, toddler, you know, or very young siblings. Yeah, and I said to her, I was like, oh my God, like, please, like, no, like, I understood from really young, because I was seeing everything play out right in front of me. And I was, you know, like, it's easy to connect the, or it was easy for me to connect the dots. Like, you were doing the best that you could. And I knew that. And I also felt like it was my responsibility to help you. She said, yeah, that's all well and good, but I need to apologize to you, because like that was unfair to you as a child. There's a part of that was sort of an invasion or an intrusion upon your childhood. You know? And I can't, looking back, I can't believe that I did that to you. Like, you know, she was crying and I was crying, and it was like, you know, this emotional thing that I totally didn't expect. But like, back to that point of like, you know, we need to like see ourselves through our own gazes for healing and things to happen, right? Like on our own terms, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, I mean, it's so complex, right? Because it's that ability to connect the dots that, I mean, that's foundational to your, you know, prowess as a storyteller, and just how rooted your storytelling is, you know, how profoundly rooted it is, and just the continuity there. Speaking of continuity, I was also thinking the second time I watched it, like, this is also, I think, a movie for young people of a certain age.
Yeah.
For children, I want to know, like, your oldest, like, I mean, your daughter is your oldest, right?
My son is
your oldest. Okay.
9, yeah. No, that's been also.
Well, they're both kind of older. I don't know. What do they think? Because maybe they're both old enough to maybe like appreciate it. Yeah.
They love it, and it's been interesting because as the film has played at different festivals, increasingly, because I definitely did not make it thinking about children. About children in the film. Clearly, I wasn't thinking of them as an audience, but as it's played, you know, especially because people are watching it at home, children are kind of coming in and out as they're watching it. And like a lot of people have written me and been like, yo, my 7-year-old like sat and watched the whole thing. You know, my 10-year-old sat and watched the whole thing. Because interestingly, they are fascinated by seeing little reflections of themselves.
Exactly. They like to see themselves too.
Yeah. I mean,
everybody does. Yeah.
It's a human need, right? Like it's a real need that we have, right? And so and so in kind of getting those reactions, it's also dawned on me that like, you know, there's been a lot of kind of moves around diversity and inclusion in children's programming, but a lot of it is like cartoons, right? Or like superhero movies. None of it is like children that actually look like my children, you know, or like the little people in your life, right? Like, and it's not their everyday. You know, and so it's been interesting because when my kids were really, I involved them a lot as I was making the film, and they would watch footage with me and they watched the film. And, you know, we'd watch a scene or something together and I'd be like, what'd you think about this? Or I'm struggling with that, you know, and I don't know what to do with this character. And they would be totally like focused, not on the adults. It would be focused on like, oh my God, did you see she put that thing in her mouth? That's so funny. My friend, blah, 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 does the same thing. And it'd be like things that I hadn't noticed, even though I'd watched that footage like 3 or 4 times already, because they literally like are glued and fascinated by themselves on screen, right? Or little people that look like them on screen. So that's been, you know, it's kind of this. And then I've had the other side of it where it's like, you know, people in my age group or, you know, maybe a little bit younger, watching it with their parents, you know, with their mothers, you know, and then getting those, you know, and those conversations happening, you know, a lot of like mother-daughter conversations, happening, a lot of reflection
Right.
about relationship dynamics and things. So it's kind of like a very intergenerational movie, even though I can't take credit for that. I certainly didn't think about it necessarily that way, but it's a beautiful surprise.
But you told, I mean, the story is so honestly rendered, so that's going to happen. All those things are going to happen organically. Another thing that I noticed that I haven't seen in films that maybe deal with similar subject matter, like going back to the quote that you have on the screen at the beginning, like that just kind of made me very focused and lean into just noticing more, just also like it's such a love letter to like freaking childcare workers and just the worlds that they create, the multitudes of universes that they create, like that environment, that house, and then how that palette kind of bled over to the parade, right? Which was also a space that was created for different generations and children. And it really made me aware of just the aesthetics and the environments that adults that really, really care about children create in this crazy world, in this world that can be, I mean, just that house it's magical. The world that they've created, it's just, and you really captured those aesthetics, which I feel like doesn't, there's like the aesthetics of the adult world, and then they're kind of the good aesthetics, right, of the world that people that care for children create. These powerful, colorful, exuberant, joy-filled, life-filled colors and aesthetics and tactile experiences. And I think that's something, that also just brings you back. If you were lucky enough to have, teachers like that or childcare workers like that. And I just wanted to, note that and how much I appreciated that. And I just thought that was so powerful. That particular choice that you made. How are Dolores and Patrick and Marisol doing?
They're doing okay. They're all safe and healthy, exhausted because they have been, all of them, working this whole time during the pandemic. They're all essential workers.
So Dee's Tots has been open this whole time. It's been going.
Yeah. So Shanona is a nurse, so she's been working. Marisol works for a supermarket supplier, so she's been working 6 days a week this whole time during quarantine. And so and many other parents who are essential workers. So Dee's Tots has been one of those few daycares that has remained open because they provide care for essential working families. So, I mean, if we're tired of quarantine and of the pandemic, like you can imagine, where they're at. They're worn down and, really, I think overall, equally scared as everyone else is about everything that is happening. And impacted by all the multiple things happening this year. But they are physically safe and physically healthy and, doing their best to kind of show up for each other and their children and the community. Patrick and Nunu have been, they continue to be the kind of safety net for that community. And in this pandemic moment, you can imagine families are facing a lot of different issues, all sorts of insecurity, from food insecurity to housing insecurity. And Nunu and Patrick are like right there trying to help people and
I
fill
can only,
gaps and plug holes and things like that.
because that's what they do.
They do.
They're
That's what
just,
they've been doing for over 2 decades.
Yeah, it's like literally I mean, there will be all these people that just literally keep society going. But the difference is so rarely are those songs sung. Right. So rarely are those stories, captured and given the proper love and respect that they deserve in the way that you did as a filmmaker. Also just, I mean, them, like them as like kind of vessels of love. I also just, that was so powerful. The scenes like you were talking about, like the scenes with Patrick, especially when he's really communing with a lot of the young, like African-American boys and Afro-Latino boys, and just the way they're vibing off of him. And I know some of the stats also around like Black male teachers and childcare, work, just like, that there's such a need. And it's so, and he's just kind of joking around. And he's just so kind of like, I'm not the one in charge. She's the one in charge. And he's kind of like goofy. And he's just like solid and strong and there and reliable. And like, that's what they need. And
Yep.
that's like good. And that works for
I
them.
mean, yeah, I love that you're bringing this up because he obviously plays a very different role than
Yeah.
he does in the daycare, and we, I think, rightly celebrate Nunu quite a
Yeah.
bit, when we're talking about the film, but he is just as critical.
And it's such a portrait of masculinity.
Yeah,
It's
he's
such
just
a,
as
a
critical, and those
yeah.
kids love Papa. Like
Yeah.
they dangle
Yeah.
off of him, like, and doesn't matter how big they get, they're
Yeah.
still like climbing on him, and
Yeah.
like, and he, there's this sort of like the space is truly magical. I just, you said that, but I want to like circle back to it, and because I think it connects to the magic of them and their relationship.
Yeah.
Uh like what you experience of the space is not an exaggeration, it's not a manipulation in the edit, like we really didn't do anything, it's really like what you see is what it is. So much so that at certain points different members of our crew were experiencing really difficult personal issues, family issues and things. um, and whenever I would call to like schedule a shoot, sometimes like their partners would be like, "Are you sure you should be working right now? Like, you shouldn't take that gig. You should like, do this or do that." And they'd be like, "No, like it helps me actually to be there. Like the daycare is like my happy place. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's restorative." So like it became that for us,
Mm-hmm.
even like working long days and shooting, like crew members like told
Yeah.
me that it is a truly magical space. And Nuno and Patrick, like I believe that this is like truly their calling.
Mm-hmm. Oh
Um,
yeah, for
and,
sure.
the way that they it's like this beautifully choreographed ballet in there,
Yeah.
and it's effortless. Not that, and I'm not romanticizing. I'm not saying that it's not hard. I'm not saying that there aren't
No, they're
issues.
pros. They are pros.
But it's like you're witnessing like
Yeah.
magic in front of
No,
you,
they,
And
yeah.
Patrick is key with his
Yeah.
like, humor and his
Yeah.
approach. It's like, they're like
Yeah.
perfect balance to each other. It's like such a beautiful, and it was such a joy to like be able to like celebrate them and their love story as well. Yeah.
No, in the back of your head, you're so aware of like the generations that they have impacted and
Yep.
raised, and that this goes back to their own kids, all the kids that they've worked with, and just, yeah, all the layers, like, with Patrick and with Dolores too. There's definitely the modeling piece, and that's powerful, and there's definitely the identification. But with, like, especially a lot of the footage that you got of Dolores too, there's just this transcendence, and just she's just that way with every type of kid, no
She
matter what they look like, no matter what their gender is, no matter what their race is, no matter what their background is. She
Yep.
is a lover of children and babies, and just, yeah, was like born to, and obviously Patrick too. And
Yep.
so it's really powerful in that way. And there's this focus, and there is this zooming in on how important modeling is and how important you need to see yourselves, but that there's also that isn't separate from, there's an interplay between that and the universal love,
Yeah.
and just the love of humans and little beings and little bodies. And
A good
um
friend of mine recently said, like, imagine if the country was run like Nono's daycare center. And I'm like, yo, that's totally possible because she's doing it, like, and it's like something I'm like holding on to, and
mhm,
especially when you think about like, you know, things are so grim right now
yeah,
and so gnarly, and it's so also overwhelming, and it's always, I think, really easy to be clear about like what we're fighting against. What we're fighting for isn't always as clear for folks to pinpoint. And in my head, I'm like, no, we're fighting for the country to be run like Nunu's daycare center.
totally. No,
And
no,
it's
I mean,
possible. Humans are capable, right?
totally.
Like, I,
Yeah.
I insist.
No, totally. I mean, I thought about that too, and thought that, like, along those lines, that if the country were, or the world for that matter, were run, humanity was run like Nuna's daycare, childcare and children's education, starting with the littlest ones, would be the priority. and it is the priority,
Yes,
and it
it's
should be, but there's some
unfair, right?
confusion about that. But like that is the ultimate priority. Is there, we've been developed, we've done our developing as adults, we've had our, time. And yes, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen, but the first priority has to be their development, their education. And if they were running the country, it would be, right. So, and I mean, I think they just speak to that, also, yeah, like speaking of daycare, I just wanted to ask, like, Marisol, it seemed like maybe her daughter might like get I just felt like she was maybe like a couple of years from now gonna get like an after school job there or something. Like she just seems like she's naturally inching towards like
I mean,
being
that's
a
what's happened.
helper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what's happened de facto,
Yeah. And I wonder, and also like, yeah, just thinking about that, it made me think about that, just like the structure, if the structures that should be set up to facilitate that
Mhm.
for like young people to really support them, and for there to be like funding and jobs for you people that are younger and have stronger backs and arms, or, not stronger, but just haven't like used them forever for like so many years, and, to lift up those things and clean
Yeah,
those things and
yeah,
do all those things that could really support them, and the kind of like structure that, yeah, needs to be created for these kind of efforts to really be supported, because they're just kind of like doing it, you know what I mean, on
yeah,
their own. But yeah.
yeah. Which isn't fair either, right? And it's unfair, it's unreasonable, it's unjust for us to, which is also one of the things that I always do like to mention, because I don't want people to sort of watch the film and sort of be comfortable and feel left off the hook because, like, look, Nunu and Patrick exist, and like these two individuals are the answer to everything. Like, no, they're examples. We need to celebrate them. We need to thank them. We need to value them, compensate them appropriately. We also need to follow their leadership, because in all these decades of doing this work, they're experts that could help the rest of us figure out the way forward. They're not just the people that do the work, they are also the people that have the answers and the solutions. But still, with all of that, I don't want any of us to feel comfortable, because this is a responsibility that should be a societal responsibility, right? Like it's a social, structural need. It's never going to be enough for one or two people to do that, and one or two people cannot replace a social safety net, which is essentially what we don't have in the
Yep.
US, right? And what we desperately need, because there are these needs that are universal and that are super basic, you know but that we are all denied access to, because again of like the US brand of capitalism. So
Yeah, and I think, it's one piece of art, but these pieces of art are important and valuable and are tools, and your film is a tool. Like, it, to me, it falls into, the like Paulo Freire, kind of philosophy, the Brazilian, liberation theologian, of this idea, which I've always tried to just always keep in the back of my head as a mantra. And, in my work, in the curatorial work, of just, the role of work like this, you have this idea that you have to see something, and then you have to analyze it, and then you act. I think, your film is the see and analyzing part, for sure. And it provides so much opportunity to really see, if you didn't see, see what's unseen,
yeah.
and really analyze the situation.
Yeah.
And then, for us to, yeah, really use this as a tool to move forward collectively. And what a amazing, I mean, this is about moving forward collectively in love, just loving each other. I
Right?
mean,
Like,
this is,
who doesn't want love and care?
yeah.
Right? Like, we all want that.
Yeah. And these kids are so happy to, yeah. And they're completely, I mean, they could probably write 10 books about early childhood development. They're clearly just like complete experts in
Expert.
childhood development. And these kids are just in the best possible, care. And it's also obviously super educational. They're being stimulated, intellectually, physically, socially, like it's all, happening. And yeah, I'm not surprised that your crew wanted to go who doesn't want to go hang out there? It's like, that's where, yeah, that is like where we all want to be, man. Like that's what
Reed was like, it was, one of the crew members, I don't want to like out her, but she said that to me. And then other people said other things throughout, the process of filming. And I was just like, wow, like it's such a testament, that everyone is like, even for the adults, this is the happy place,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And speaking of which, like one other question I want to ask you about, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, I think again, like this is such a, the project is just so reflective of a strong, like rooted sense of continuity. Like I noticed that Tatiana Jenkins, who is a young person that I worked with at Maisels, several years, who's a brilliant young woman, is your associate producer and associate editor, right? And then JT, who's the executive director of Third World Newsreel and is like a veteran
Yep.
Japanese American, filmmaker, and yeah, it like also worked on the project. And I just think in this film and in your work in general, it's like, it's just the holism and the integrity is there from like A to Z, and that continuity is in there, and even like how the film came together, and then obviously in the story. And again, I feel like Tatiana is kind of like maybe a little mini you, and some like there's some she's like the next on the come up, right? Like
listen, she lives super close to me in the Bronx, like
yeah.
definitely like by design.
Yeah. And so like I don't know, I just wanted you to, and I just think, and I bring this up now again, after having watched the film for a second time, as we're like deeper into the pandemic, and it hit me harder. And it's like, this is so important right now, this kind of continuity, this kind of sense that like we are part of something bigger, we are part of a multi-generational journey, that we're in the middle of something that came before us and something that's going to come after us, and we're all part of this. And you just and I just want, could you just talk a little bit about that? And am I right in saying that that's like a underpinning of your philosophy as an artist, as a cultural worker?
Yeah, no,
And if you could just talk a little bit about that, and especially like right now, how that continuity works in the face of this uncertainty and chaos, the role it plays.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that was I will take credit for that, because that was intentional. I mean, there were a couple things that once I finally like, kind of accepted that I was gonna really try to make this film, because I did try to talk myself out of it, because I have a full-time job and 2 kids and I'm a single mom. I was like, no, you probably should not take
And a
this
DJ.
on.
And a DJ. I forgot to mention in the intro. And a DJ.
I was like, maybe you're already doing the most, like chillax,
Yeah.
and I tried, but the idea kind of wouldn't leave me alone. And so when I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm doing this, there were a couple things that were key for me. One was that I really wanted to work with an all women of color team. Back to this piece around like wanting to create work that is like, people talk a lot about gaze, nowadays, right? And for me, I think about gaze as like glasses. Like you put on a different pair of glasses, you're gonna see differently, right? And the glasses are essentially your lived experience. And so I wanted everyone working on the film to see themselves and feel, be someone that identified with this community in some way, shape, or form, because I wanted this to be through our own gaze. And that's what gaze means to me, right? It's like, I want to make work that shows my community, the way that I see my community, right? Which is layered and complex and unique because of my perspective as like a Bronx Black Dominican, right? Like, your perspective is going to be different than mine, somebody else's perspective, right? But if we are coming into a space being like, these are my people, that's going to sort of lead to a particular kind of thing, versus when you have folks that are not that are outsiders to a community. And an outsider can mean a lot of different things, and I don't mean to be reductive, but the just, to me, the key piece is that there's a sense of identification, that like, I see myself in you, you see yourself in me, not you're so different than me, I'm trying to understand your experience, or I'm trying to explain your experience to other people that don't understand who you are, right? And so that piece was critical for me. And in a sort of really organic way, what ended up happening was that not only was everyone a woman of color, but everyone really did connect to the story in very personal, intimate ways, whether it's because they were raised by a single mother, or because they were currently a working mother, or because, you know, one of our cinematographers, her mother ran a home-based daycare center while she was, you know, in school. And this was her after school job, you know, she was helping her mom, you know, or like, right, everyone had these really personal, formative, you know, connections. And I think that what you see on screen reflects that, right, that this kind of project of a love letter was a shared project. It wasn't just mine, you know. That was one piece. The other piece of it is that for me, I've been really fortunate that growing up in New York City, I was one of those young people that kind of came up through youth organizing programs, right? And so I was part of the Dominican Women's Development Center, you know, in my teens. I was at a program around like environmental justice in my late teens at the Point Community Development Center, and had people, you know, my age and older, like young adults and older adults, really invested in me as a young person, right? And so I got poured into by mentors, community mentors, right? And so that for me, like the kind of importance of that relationship is a personal one, because I know that I've benefited, you know, and I am who I am because of those elders that poured into me. And then I became part of organizing spaces and youth development spaces and sort of worked with young people, you know, and so my whole life kind of I've been in this intergenerational project, right, of like understanding the importance of connection and conversation, you know, and that we all have like a unique role to play, right, you know. And now as a 40-some-year-old, you know, with two kids, I often see spaces that are not intergenerational, and like that's always like my first thing is to be like, where the elders at in here, you know. Or if I'm in a space where everyone's like 40 and above, I'm like, yo, where's the 18-year-olds?
The bridge. The
Yeah,
bridge. Like we're the bridge. That's the way I think about it. When you're in the middle, it's like your role is the bridge, and you gotta.
As a good Gen X member, right? We are good bridges. That has been our identity as a generation.
No, but now it really is. Like when you get, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that for me is critical. And in this moment, how critical is it, right? Like, and one of the beautiful things that I'm seeing, like, again, literally from my family onto like my neighborhood and community, is that like through this kind of conversation, this more formal or visible conversation about mutual aid, you know, I have like really, really young people in my life that are doing grocery shopping for senior citizens, right? And like getting to know like the seniors that live by themselves, you know, on your block or in your community that you before might not have. You know, you knew them, you would say good morning, good afternoon, but you didn't really know, you know, like how they were spending their days or what they used to do or what they're dreaming of now, right? And so that is happening right now, and quite literally in a pandemic moment where we're all, you know, sort of shut down and whatever. These are the things that are quite literally keeping us alive, right? So the importance of that intergenerational connection, and then also just sort of naming that these are things that they might have kind of higher stakes right now, and they might be more visible, but that these networks have been how we have survived, right? That mutual aid is not new for poor folks of color, you know, for undocumented communities, queer and trans communities, for single mothers. Like, we've been doing this because guess what? Before the pandemic, it was already really hard for us. Like, we've been living the apocalypse for a really, really long time, you know? And so I love the fact that mutual aid is a buzzword, right? And that more people can be invited into that space. And I also, at the same time, want to lift up that we have been doing this, and this is quite literally what has kept us alive. And it has always been intergenerational and needs to always be intergenerational.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like the idea that the pandemic is perhaps a portal. And then it's like, okay, a portal to what? And then also just really being clear that, a portal to it, it being like, D's tots is there's a political fight involved and making that happen. But there is this opportunity. We have this opportunity, to this is a portal to something.
Yep.
It's just, what is it going to be?
Yeah,
what are we gonna make it?
Yeah, it's chaotic, it's harsh, it's violent, it's scary, it's all those things, and it's also like full of possibility.
There's an opportunity. There's a lot of awareness, and just people waking up in ways that are really, it's really scary, but it's just also, it's, I always like to say it's terrifying, but this time is pregnant with promise.
Yep.
It's
I agree.
Yeah, totally. Well, the last thing, I'm going to ask you one more thing, and then we're going to wrap it up as much as I could, continue talking to you forever, of course. So, and this actually really kind of connects back to the last thing you said. So the theme of the festival this year is Urbana. And there's a lot of programming that falls under part of the, what we're exploring in this thematic framework is, and it just kind of, we looked at it and discovered that this was the case. And it was like, wow, it just, was a really good thing to hang our hat on, that this year, 2020 is also the 25th anniversary of the passing of Selena and the 20th anniversary of the passing of DJ Screw. So, and this idea, of Urbana, of, based on the genre music Urbana, this idea of kind of extending it beyond that, like culture and art and politics and thinking and dance and film and everything, a lot of different forms of expression that are rooted in the intermingling that came out of the transatlantic slave trade and Africa, and the intermingling between indigenous cultures in the Americas and the Caribbean and African culture. I bring this up because I feel like you're somebody in your work, and especially also in your DJ work, and and shout out to a party called Rosie Perez, right? That's what it's called, yes. Which is like, can't get more Urbana than that. So I think that's, and you talked about, the layers of these identities and the layers of, of recognition. And I just, if you could just, like, what, I don't know, maybe this is kind of a big question, but like, what is your thinking around Afro, Latinx, Latina identity, and what that means to you, and how that connects up to your work, how much that is a part of, I mean, I feel like in the film, it comes through this kind of, layered intermingling kind of world, the lens, right? The gaze that you talked about. I mean, I think you're somebody who really has this kind of, I would say, like Afro-Latinx gaze through which you are examining the world and, is being explored in your art. And this is something that we really wanted to celebrate in this year's festival. It's something that is so found in Houston. Shout out to Houston. It's a real ground zero for this kind of, and has been like since the beginning of, the Americas, right? So if you could just talk a little bit about that, what that is, the Afro-Latinx gaze, and what that means to you.
Yeah, no, it is a big question, but it's certainly something that I think a lot about, because growing up in New York City, my whole experience, in the early part of my life was people read me as Black, meaning Black American. This was at a time, right? So like Dominicans were a fairly recent, kind of in terms of immigrating in large numbers, that really started to happen in the 80s. And so I was growing up in New York City in the 80s, right, where we were still this very recent thing, this recent phenomenon. Obviously, there was already, in the neighborhoods that I grew up in, there was already a really established Puerto Rican community and African American community. And so as Dominicans, many of us were coming into a cultural space that already had a lot of kind of collaboration and intermingling, right, between Puerto Ricans and African Americans in New York City, both culturally, certainly in terms of music, but also politically, right? Like if you think about the Panthers and the Young Lords, and then like, the Justice Committee and people like Richie Perez and Iris Morales and many others who then really became mentors to my generation of folks. Like we're like directly descendant, right, from that that solidarity work, right? That shared project of solidarity that to me I think about as just really like seeking dignity for, you know, for our communities, that we could, that our folks could live, you know, with dignity, right? Yeah. And so, you know, I come into that space, you know, hip hop is still relatively young as well, you know, and it's a space where like, again, the intermingling, right? You have like, you know, hip hop gets talked about as like African American, but it's really a diasporic creation that is what it is because it started here in the Bronx, and you had Jamaicans and you had Puerto Ricans and you had African Americans, and then you had like a random Dominican or a random Venezuelan or somebody else, you know, sprinkled in. It's like truly this diasporic expression, just as like, you know, contemporary like you know, queer and trans ballroom culture
Mm-hmm.
is also a very uniquely like New York creation that is, it is what it is because you have all these people of the African diaspora side by side creating something new together, right? And so this is like the space that I've grown up in. So for me, like back to this idea of bridges, I see all the connections. I'm living the connections. I am the connection, right? Like, you know, quite literally, people are talking to me and like they're like, "Oh, oh, you Spanish? I just thought you was black." And I'm like,
Right.
"I am black and I speak Spanish."
Right.
Like that's the thing, right? Like black people speak English, they speak Spanish, they speak French, they speak Portuguese, they speak
Right.
Dutch. Because guess what? The colonizers like went everywhere, right? And we got dropped off in all
Yeah.
different kinds of places. And so that's been my whole life. I've existed
Yeah.
in that space, you know, of like
Right.
things that people think are completely like mutually exclusive, and
Yeah.
maybe actually no, like you were right, I am black, and yeah, you were also right, and I speak Spanish.
Right.
You know, like both things are possible. So I think about that, you know, but then I also think about like in the case of the film, Marisol is Mexican,
Yeah.
right? And it was important for me to have a Latino character in the film. She's not an Afro Latina, she's
Right.
Latina, but there's also a piece of like back to like New York. Our reality is that, you know, whether it's like Black Latinos or non-Black Latinos, there is a shared kind of like class-based solidarity, right? Our neighborhoods we go to schools together, we work the same jobs, you know, we live in the same neighborhoods, we shop in the same places. When the police comes through the hood, they're gonna take the sort of super indigenous looking Mexican kid and the Jamaican kid and the Senegalese kid and the African American kid and the Puerto Rican kid, and they all gonna get their asses beat, right? Like the police does not make those distinctions in our communities, right? And we grow up sharing these experiences, both the good and the bad. We're also like the people that are sharing, you know, plates of food on Thanksgiving and
Mm-hmm.
Christmas, right? So you grow up eating macaroni and cheese and candied yams and arroz con
Mm-hmm.
gandules and, you know, everything in between. Like that's what we live, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the beef and the tensions, right? When
Mm-hmm.
we kind of internalize white supremacy and then try to play that out on each other.
Right.
But all these things coexist.
And that's all cross cultural because you could say the same exact thing about Houston
Right.
or any big city that has this kind of, you know, mixture. And yeah,
Yeah.
all of these issues, all this intermingling, all of this tension, it's the same. It's cross
Yeah.
cultural. It's everybody's. Yeah, Marisol, man, she's determined.
Yeah.
She
You know,
was
and
she was a great, yeah.
like how, you know, we all know a Marisol,
Yeah,
you know, like,
I mean, just the determination in her face was just like
yeah.
so powerful and moving and
You know,
incredible.
to me, I just to say a thing about that is that I am interested in like exposing the systems that do not work for any of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's like, you know, I'm a black woman. I lead with my blackness that has like marked every part of my
Mm-hmm.
experience and my existence. And at the same time, I understand that there are these experiences that are shared, and I am interested in like this project, a project of solidarity that allows for like dignity for all of us, right?
Yeah.
So like it is important for me to create artwork that shows those points of connection, right? Not to be like we're all in the same boat or we're all the same or kumbaya or anything like that. But there are, really, I believe that our futures, hell, our present are really intertwined and interdependent, and if Marisol doesn't make it, I'm not gonna make it.
Yeah,
And
word.
like,
Yeah,
and so I think that's important to hold that, and then also have the really complex conversations about
right,
race and ethnicity and all the
right.
issues and all the tensions. But it's like I'm clear,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and that all of this connects up because frankly, I mean, there's so much hidden history around Mexico's Africanness. So, I mean, it's, yeah, all these connections are there. You talk about hidden and unhidden, right? There's a lot of kind of,
and ultimately it's like I don't believe white supremacy. I don't believe what whiteness tells us, that that the only frame of mind to exist within is one of scarcity,
yeah,
where that teaches us that some people are disposable while others are valuable.
yes,
I don't believe that,
yeah,
and that's like the project of capitalism, and I refuse to believe it. And so I need Marisol to make it, I need Shanona to make
yeah,
it, I need the homie in Houston to make it. Like
yeah.
I want my people, all of us, to get through the apocalypse.
That's our best shot. That's our best shot for sure. And yeah, I mean, everything you're saying, I mean, again, I just want you to know how completely and holistically and just firmly your work affirms and everything that you're saying, and um, just really captures all the points that you want to make, just come through and through the night, and in just like the most beautiful, natural, grounded way. And it's just so powerful and so empowering and heartbreaking and everything. I mean, all of these things, it's really, really, you did your thing, girl. So thank you so much for your film, Loira Limbal, and it'll be on PBS in the spring, and there's more exciting following, information to come out about the film, lots of things in the works, and keep your eye on this one, on Loira Limbal, who will be doing a lot of other incredible things in her career. And thank you, Loira, so much.
So,
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. Thanks, audience, for joining us, and thank you, Loira.
no,
Thank you.
thank
Thank
you. Thank
you.
you so much, Jessica.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks.
you. And have a great festival.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Yeah. Thanks. And good luck with the project and everywhere that it goes and travels. And so excited about it. Yay.
Well,
Go through the night.
people do want to like be in touch, or we are partnering and trying to do a lot of different kind of work in communities around organizing and things like that. People could just follow us through the website. It's through thenightfilm.com. And there's information there. You could also get in touch with us if you'd like. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Lloyd. I can't wait.